So our next speaker is Lenneke Kuijer from Eindhoven University of Technology.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so I'm Lenneke Kuijer from Eindhoven, and I wrote this paper on co-performance together with Elisa Giaccardi from TU Delft. And well, it's an honor to be presenting in this well-composed session. In this talk, I will walk you through the highlights of our paper with the hope to trigger you to read it in full, because there's much more in the paper than I can express in this talk. But the core contribution of the paper is the introduction and exploration of a novel conceptualization of artificial agency that draws on social practice theory. So to give some definitions, by artificial agency, we refer to both the capacity of computational artifacts, as equipped with sensors, actuators, and computing power, to act in a situation, as well as to the causing of an effect with that action. Social practice theory is a group of theories from sociology/philosophy that takes activities, cooking, presenting, driving, parenting, as opposed to, for example, human psychology or interactions, as their fundamental unit for understanding human behavior, or rather everyday life. Okay, so to help you relate to the fairly abstract concepts introduced, I will use the example of smart thermostats and more broadly, practices of keeping warm at home throughout. So imagine you are developing a new smart thermostat. During the process, you may wonder what effect your design may have on the lives of your users and their environment over the next decade or so. Existing conceptualizations of artificial agency in HEI, such as script, affordance, and technological mediation, have much to say about how detailed characteristics of artifacts shape the actions and perceptions of their users. However, they do not explicitly conceptualize broader, longer-term effects of design decisions on human behavior or everyday life. Social practice theory has been picked up in HEI and argued to be promising for tackling these effects. However, a weak spot of the theory remains its applicability for HEI. Co-performance is a modification of practice theory that we developed that aims to tackle this by attributing special status to computational artifacts. To explain the perspective on artificial agency made possible by this modification, I first need to introduce two concepts from practice theory, which are first the recursive relation between social practices and situated performances, and second, the concept of practices as constellations of elements. So a social practice, also referred to as the practice's entity, is a socially shared idea of appropriate and inappropriate behavior. For example, in keeping warm at home, it's generally considered appropriate to have your thermostat manage your indoor temperature, and less appropriate or inappropriate to heat your home to tropical temperatures at all times. This difference between appropriate and inappropriate is not black and white. The social practice frames what is generally considered appropriate, but eventually appropriateness is judged in the situated performance. The situated performance is the actual observable behavior. For example, you are now performing the social practice of listening to a talk. We have a shared understanding of what it means to do that properly, and you are reproducing that idea by adhering to it. You might also deviate from the agreed frame in cases of new and unexpected situations. For example, if I would now start to walk out of the room while talking, what would you do? In such situations, appropriate performance needs to be reinterpreted in the moment. If repeated many times, the new behavior becomes normal and the shape of the social practice shifts. The second concept I need to briefly explain is the idea of practices as constellations of elements. Okay, just need a bit of water. In the strand of practice theory that we build on, practices are viewed as constellations of elements grouped as materials, meanings, and competences. Keeping warm at home, for example, involves materials such as radiators, thermostats, air, doors, and clothing. meanings such as coziness, staying healthy, and saving energy, and competences of programming the thermostat and knowing when to ventilate. Humans are considered to integrate these elements in situated performances. Computational artifacts, like the thermostat, are considered part of material elements. Putting these two together depicts how human agency is conceptualized in practice theory. Okay, so here you have the social practice, the entity, and next to it, the situated performances. Humans perform practices by integrating elements in ways that are, as framed by the social practice, appropriate for the situation at hand. This situated integration of elements maintains or reshapes the social practice. As such, performers not only exert agency in the moment, but also beyond it, because they help shape the social practice that in turn shapes subsequent performances. This effect becomes particularly visible at larger timescales. For example, keeping warm at home has over time changed from making and mending coal fires to having a smart thermostat. But what does that mean, having a smart thermostat? Is having a smart thermostat keeping you comfortable? This really depends on what the smart thermostat does. But while making a coal fire can be described in detail in this framework, the exact actions of the thermostat are not normally considered. Emerging from our keen interest in the role of computational artifacts, we started to wonder why the actions of a thermostat managing an indoor climate should be less interesting than the actions of a human doing the same. This is why we developed co-performance. Co-performance is a modification of practice theory that lifts computational artifacts out of the category of materials and places them next to humans as co-performers of practices. As such, co-performance conceptualizes a shared agency between human and artificial performers of social practices. This positioning of artificial agency within practice theory is the core contribution of the paper. In the following slides, I will briefly illustrate some implications of this move for HEI. First, a co-performance perspective sheds new light on the role of computational artifacts in shaping everyday life. For example, co-performance highlights how differences in capabilities between human and artificial performers shape ideas of appropriateness in historic processes of delegation. In domestic heating, the shifting of the decision when to add fuel to the heating system from humans to thermostats has changed how this decision is made. While humans are capable of taking into account a wide range of situated circumstances, like the people in the room, what they are wearing, how they are feeling, what they are doing and going to do, etc., the thermostat is only capable of taking a limited set of these factors into account. Other than humans, moreover, though, it is capable, in collaboration with gas infrastructure, of switching on the heating in people's absence. These changes in divisions of tasks have had far-going consequences for ideas of appropriate indoor climates, in which temperature levels have become much more central, and entering a pre-warmed room has become expected. What this example also highlights is how, through cycles of delegation, quantifiable aspects of practices tend to be foregrounded over less measurable ones. Other implications discussed in the paper of the proliferation of artificial agents in everyday life, highlighted by co-performance, are a shifting of situated judgments to professional design practices, the risk of such shifts to lead to inappropriate judgments in new and exceptional circumstances, and the potential of a growing power imbalance between users and professional designers. Besides these more analytic implications, the paper also briefly speculates how co-performance could be a step towards new conceptual tools for HEI design. To illustrate this, I return to the example of the smart thermostat. Co-performance draws attention to the idea of appropriate practice embodied in the thermostat's design. This involves heating a home according to a learned pattern of temperature preferences. Compared to program thermostats, smart thermostats involve a practice in which artificial performers have taken over programming of the thermostat from humans. One of the effects of this move is that skills of knowing how to program appropriate patterns of temperature diminish in situated human performers and are actually then moved to the design process. And artificial performances, and thereby professional ideas of appropriate home heating, gain further importance. Given differences in capabilities between humans and computational artifacts, the question arises whether this is desirable. Okay, so it might be enlarging this artificial agency in the practice. When instead focusing on designing for appropriate co-performance, over time, human-computer collaboration becomes foregrounded over device autonomy. This expands the design space of computational artifacts with the unique skills and characteristics of human performers. Moreover, it emphasizes how HCI design is always about co-performance. Because what are autonomous cars without people wanting to go places? Smart safety systems without people seeking shelter, and intelligent assistants without people going about their lives. So to wrap up, our paper introduces a new conceptualization of artificial agency that is based on co-performance, which is a modification of social practice theory. Co-performance thereby forms a gateway for HCI into practice theoretic frameworks, which offer a rich empirical and conceptual body of knowledge that links the broader, longer-term dynamics of everyday life to detailed decisions made in the design process. Finally, the paper describes several implications for HCI research and design and forms an invitation for the HCI community to further explore its potential in the future. Thank you very much. So
Time for a few
please
questions.
ask some questions. I still have some invitations for the TV party tonight to give out to good ones.
So I should be careful with what I ask. I was wondering if you have any examples to share that maybe didn't make it into the paper, but like, so you're basically saying when we design, I would be particularly curious into like hearing if you try to apply this lens to the design of new systems, and how you feel it would make the difference between considering the smart thermostat or whatever you designed rather than an artifact eco-performer.
I'm not sure if I understand your question correctly, so you mean examples of how it would result in a different kind of design?
Or how it would affect the design process. So in your implication, there is, okay, this can help us in the design process. Do you have examples?
So the design process.
Or maybe I just misunderstood, I don't know.
I think it would be taking practices as your unit of design more than autonomous systems, and so that includes humans and computational artifacts in the design unit. And very concretely, maybe for heating, and this is a bit of a blunt example because the paper is not about that, it would become also about ways of dressing in addition to ways of heating spaces.
Okay, thanks.
Lenneke Verne from Uppsala University, and I would very much like an invitation to the party. And one of the things that I think is, this is too high for me, very hard when you work with design, is that you actually design to change practices. So there is a change process going on in doing design, and sometimes, especially now that systems are more services than systems, this process goes on for a very, very long time, even when the system is put in use. So how does practice theory help us with this change process that is usually central to the design process?
Yeah, I think so. If you look at that figure, I think it can really help because it makes you think beyond the situated performance in the ways in which your design through the situated performance, reshapes the social practice, which then again reshapes future performances. So it is about larger effects of the decisions you made, and you can this theoretic framework helps you to discuss that and get a grip on it. And of course, this requires process-wise, it requires empirical work and an iterative design process. Is that an answer?
Hi, I'm Kai Hofmeester, Oculus Research. Thanks, very interesting talk. In the future, as products and devices are getting more and more automated and making more and more decisions for the users rather than the user making the decision, what do you think the implications are on this model that you have here? Would it be sometimes that the device is actually changing the way this appropriate kind of co-performance rather than the user or the user and the device? Do you think that the relationship might shift all the way towards the device? The device then understanding the user or trying to understand the user?
I think there will always be a matter of co-performance, because, well, at least when you look at social practices, the doing of a device doesn't have a meaning without the human purpose that it
but it could
takes
be
part in.
It could be that is encoded in the device itself, right? That the device tries to understand the goals of the human or the purpose of the human, as you say.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think there is a bit of a risk in like too far going processes of delegation, and then that's described more in the paper in the sense that there are differences in capabilities between humans and artifacts, and that if you have this far-going delegation, there is also a shifting of power from the situated performance to the professional design practice, where experts decide what is appropriate to do in any situation. Well, this really may depend on the situation at hand, and I think in many cases people, and again the paper talks more about this, are sometimes better equipped to judge, to improvise and to respond to unexpected situations.
Thank you.
Let's thank our speaker again.